of progress. Because where we live shapes how we live, and how we live shapes who we become. It's never just about walls and roofs. It's about the lives unfolding within them, the offices where careers are created, the homes where stories are written, the kitchens that gather the warmth of Sunday afternoons, the living rooms filled with laughter, love, and legacy. This year, we look beyond bricks and mortar to the harmony between thoughtful design and the rhythms of everyday life. From curated interiors to local innovation, we celebrate the ways space and culture inspire one another. At EcoBank, we know that building a nation means building with heart and purpose, championing the architects, the artisans, and the everyday dreamers who bring visions to life, and create places that feel like home, places where we belong. Because when we build together, we live better. Our buildings, our communities, our nation. EcoBank Design and Build Exhibition. How we build, how we live.
Hello, my name is Titi Fora. I'm the creative director of Inu Design, and I'm also the curator for the EcoBank Design and Build Exhibition, taking place at the Pan-African Center on Ozumba Mbadiwe. It is my pleasure to invite you to this year's exhibition. I'm immensely glad that EcoBank is taking on this initiative to show the world how we build, how we design, and ultimately how we use spaces. This year's theme is how we build, how we live, showing the circular nature of how what we build determines how we live in those spaces, and how also the way we live should inform how we build as Nigerians, as Africans, and as humans in general. So join us from the 24th to the 28th of September 2025 to see how we build, how we live, and how lifestyle impacts design and vice versa. This year, we're putting people at the center of the conversation. How do we use space? Why do we design the way we do? What are the things we do in space? And what do we want the built environment to do for us? So join us this year to find out how we build and how we live. I look forward to seeing you there.
Right home. At Isorai, we don't just make products, we build the foundation of your well-being. Every stitch, every fiber, and every calming aroma is designed to help you de-stress. Our mattresses and pillows are more than just an item. Our beddings and fragrances are actually crafted to support your body and mind, night after night. We'll be at the EcoBank Design and Build Exhibition. See you there.
Every great idea begins with a vision. From bold architectural plans that hold our aspirations to laying the very foundations of progress. Because where we live shapes how we live, and how we live shapes who we become. It's never just about walls and roofs. It's about the lives unfolding within them, the offices where careers are created, the homes where stories are written, the kitchens that gather the warmth of Sunday afternoons, the living rooms filled with laughter, love, and legacy. This year, we look beyond bricks and mortar to the harmony between thoughtful design and the rhythms of everyday life. From curated interiors to local innovation, we celebrate the ways space and culture inspire one another. At EcoBank, we know that building a nation means building with heart and purpose, championing the architects, the artisans, and the everyday dreamers who bring visions to life, and create places that feel like home. Places where we belong. Because when we build together, we live better. Our buildings, our communities, our nation. EcoBank Design and Build Exhibition. How we build, how we live.
Hello, my name is Titi Fora. I'm the creative director of Inu Design, and I'm also the curator for the EcoBank Design and Build Exhibition, taking place at the Pan-African Center on Ozumba Mbadiwe. It is my pleasure to invite you to this year's exhibition. I'm immensely glad that EcoBank is taking on this initiative to show the world how we build, how we design, and ultimately how we use spaces. This year's theme is How We Build, How We Live, showing the circular nature of how what we build determines how we live in those spaces, and how also the way we live should inform how we build as Nigerians, as Africans, and as humans in general. So join us from the 24th to the 28th of September 2025 to see how we build, how we live, and how lifestyle impacts design and vice versa. This year, we're putting people at the center of the conversation. How do we use space? Why do we design the way we do? What are the things we do in space? And what do we want the built environment to do for us? So join us this year to find out how we build and how we live. I look forward to seeing you there. Hello, my name is
Ewa Isorai. I'm the CEO, founder of Isorai Home. At Isorai, we don't just make products, we build the foundation of your well-being. Every stitch, every fiber, and every calming aroma is designed to help you de-stress. Our mattresses and pillows are more than just an item. Our beddings and fragrances are actually crafted to support your body and mind, night after night. We'll be at the EcoBank Design and Build exhibition. See you there.
The idea begins with a vision, from bold architectural plans that hold our aspirations to laying the very foundations of progress. Because where we live shapes how we live, and how we live shapes who we become. It's never just about walls and roofs. It's about the lives unfolding within them, the offices where careers are created, the homes where stories are written, the kitchens that gather the warmth of Sunday afternoons, the living rooms filled with laughter, love, and legacy. This year, we look beyond bricks and mortar to the harmony between thoughtful design and the rhythms of everyday life. From curated interiors to local innovation, we celebrate the ways space and culture inspire one another. At EcoBank, we know that building a nation means building with heart and purpose, championing the architects, the artisans, and the everyday dreamers who bring visions to life, and create places that feel like home, places where we belong. Because when we build together, we live better. Our buildings, our communities, our nation. EcoBank Design and Build exhibition. How we build, how we live. Every great idea begins with a vision. From bold architectural plans that hold our aspirations to laying the very foundations of progress. Because where we live shapes how we live, and how we live shapes who we become. It's never just about walls and roofs. It's about the lives unfolding within them, the offices where careers are created, the homes where stories are written, the kitchens that gather the warmth of Sunday afternoons, the living rooms filled with laughter, love, and legacy. This year, we look beyond bricks and mortar to the harmony between thoughtful design and the rhythms of everyday life. From curated interiors to local innovation, we celebrate the ways space and culture inspire one another. At EcoBank, we know that building a nation means building with heart and purpose, championing the architects, the artisans, and the everyday dreamers who bring visions to life, and create places that feel like home, places where we belong. Because when we build together, we live better. Our buildings, our communities, our nation. EcoBank Design and Build exhibition. How we build, how we live. Every great idea begins with a vision. From bold architectural plans that hold our aspirations to laying the very foundations of progress. Because where we live shapes how we live, and how we live shapes who we become. It's never just about walls and roofs. It's about the lives unfolding within them, the offices where careers are created, the homes where stories are written, the kitchens that gather the warmth of Sunday afternoons, the living rooms filled with laughter, love, and legacy. This year, we look beyond bricks and mortar to the harmony between thoughtful design and the rhythms of everyday life. From curated interiors to local innovation, we celebrate the ways space and culture inspire one another. At EcoBank, we know that building a nation means building with heart and purpose, championing the architects, the artisans, and the everyday dreamers who bring visions to life, and create places that feel like home, places where we belong. Because when we build together, we live better, our buildings, our communities, our nation. EcoBank Design and Build Exhibition. How we build, how we live. Every great idea begins with a vision. From bold architectural plans that hold our aspirations to laying the very foundations of progress. Because where we live shapes how we live, and how we live shapes who we become. It's never just about walls and roofs. It's about the lives unfolding within them, the offices where careers are created, the homes where stories are written, the kitchens that gather the warmth of Sunday afternoons, the living rooms filled with laughter, love, and legacy. This year, we look beyond bricks and mortar to the harmony between thoughtful design and the rhythms of everyday life. From curated interiors to local innovation, we celebrate the ways space and culture inspire one another. At EcoBank, we know that building a nation means building with heart and purpose, championing the architects, the artisans, and the everyday dreamers who bring visions to life, and create places that feel like home, places where we belong. Because when we build together, we live better, our buildings, our communities, our nation. EcoBank Design and Build Exhibition. How we build, how we live. Every great idea begins with a vision. From bold architectural plans that hold our aspirations to laying the very foundations of progress. Because where we live shapes how we live, and how we live shapes who we become. It's never just about walls and roofs. It's about the lives unfolding within them, the offices where careers are created, the homes where stories are written, the kitchens that gather the warmth of Sunday afternoons, the living rooms filled with laughter, love, and legacy. This year, we look beyond bricks and mortar to the harmony between thoughtful design and the rhythms of everyday life. From curated interiors to local innovation, we celebrate the ways space and culture inspire one another. At EcoBank, we know that building a nation means building with heart and purpose, championing the architects, the artisans, and the everyday dreamers who bring visions to life, and create places that feel like home, places where we belong. Because when we build together, we live better, our buildings, our communities, our nation. EcoBank Design and Build Exhibition. How we build, how we live. Every great idea begins with a vision. From bold architectural plans that hold our aspirations to laying the very foundations of progress. Because where we live shapes how we live, and how we live shapes who we become. It's never just about walls and roofs. It's about the lives unfolding within them, the offices where careers are created, the homes where stories are written, the kitchens that gather the warmth of Sunday afternoons, the living rooms filled with laughter, love, and legacy. This year, we look beyond bricks and mortar to the harmony between thoughtful design and the rhythms of everyday life. From curated interiors to local innovation, we celebrate the ways space and culture inspire one another. At EcoBank, we know that building a nation means building with heart and purpose, championing the architects, the artisans, and the everyday dreamers who bring visions to life, and create places that feel like home, places where we belong. Because when we build together, we live better, our buildings, our communities, our nation. EcoBank Design and Build Exhibition. How we build, how we live.
I'm the creative director of Innu Design.
Every great
and I'm
idea
also
begins
the
with a vision.
Hello, my name is
From
Titi
bold.
Fora. I'm the creative director of Innu Design, and I'm also the curator for the EcoBank Design and Build exhibition taking place at the Pan-African Center on Ozumba Mbadiwe. It is my pleasure to invite you to this year's exhibition. I'm immensely glad that EcoBank is taking on this initiative to show the world how we build, how we design, and ultimately how we use spaces. This year's theme is how we build, how we live, showing the circular nature of how what we build determines how we live in those spaces, and how also the way we live should inform how we build as Nigerians, as Africans, and as humans in general. So join us from the 24th to the 28th of September 2025 to see how we build, how we live, and how lifestyle impacts design and vice versa. This year, we're putting people at the center of the conversation. How do we use space? Why do we design the way we do? What are the things we do in space? And what do we want the built environment to do for us? So join us this year to find out how we build and how we live. I look forward to seeing you there. Hello, my name is Titi Fora. I'm the creative director of Innu Design, and I'm also the curator for the EcoBank Design and Build exhibition taking place at the Pan-African Center on Ozumba Mbadiwe. It is my pleasure to invite you to this year's exhibition. I'm immensely glad that EcoBank is taking on this initiative to show the world how we build, how we design, and ultimately how we use spaces. This year's theme is how we build, how we live, showing the circular nature of how what we build determines how we live in those spaces, and how also the way we live should inform how we build as Nigerians, as Africans, and as humans in general. So join us from the 24th to the 28th of September 2025 to see how we build, how we live, and how lifestyle impacts design and vice versa. This year, we're putting people at the center of the conversation. How do we use space? Why do we design the way we do? What are the things we do in space? And what do we want the built environment to do for us? So join us this year to find out how we build and how we live. I look forward to seeing you there.
My name is Elwine Sorai. I'm the CEO, founder of eSorai Home. At eSorai, we don't just make products, we build the foundation of your well-being. Every stitch, every fiber, and every calming aroma is designed to help you de-stress. Our mattresses and pillows are more than just an item. Our beddings and fragrances are actually crafted to support your body and mind, night after night. We'll be at the EcoBank Design and Build exhibition. See you there. My name is Elwine Sorai. I'm the CEO, founder of eSorai Home. At eSorai, we don't just make products, we build the foundation of your well-being. Every stitch, every fiber, and every calming aroma is designed to help you de-stress. Our mattresses and pillows are more than just an item. Our beddings and fragrances are actually crafted to support your body and mind, night after night. We'll be at the EcoBank Design and Build exhibition. See you there.
From bold architectural plans that hold our aspirations to laying the very foundations of progress. Because where we live shapes how we live, and how we live shapes who we become. It's never just about walls and roofs. It's about the lives unfolding within them, the offices where careers are created, the homes where stories are written, the kitchens that gather the warmth of Sunday afternoons, the living rooms filled with laughter, love, and legacy. This year, we look beyond bricks and mortar to the harmony between thoughtful design and the rhythms of everyday life. From curated interiors to local innovation, we celebrate the ways space and culture inspire one another. At EcoBank, we know that building a nation means building with heart and purpose, championing the architects, the artisans, and the everyday dreamers who bring visions to life and create places that feel like home, places where we belong. Because when we build together, we live better. Our buildings, our communities, our nation. EcoBank Design and Build Exhibition. How we build, how we live.
Hello, my name is Titi Fora. I'm the creative director of Inu Design, and I'm also the curator for the EcoBank Design and Build exhibition taking place at the Pan-African Center on Ozumba Mbadiwe. It is my pleasure to invite you to this year's exhibition. I'm immensely glad that EcoBank is taking on this initiative to show the world how we build, how we design, and ultimately how we use spaces. This year's theme is how we build, how we live, showing the circular nature of how what we build determines how we live in those spaces, and how also the way we live should inform how we build as Nigerians, as Africans, and as humans in general. So join us from the 24th to the 28th of September 2025 to see how we build, how we live, and how lifestyle impacts design and vice versa. This year, we're putting people at the center of the conversation. How do we use space? Why do we design the way we do? What are the things we do in space, and what do we want the built environment to do for us? So join us this year to find out how we build and how we live. I look forward to seeing you there. Hello, my name is Titi Fora. I'm the creative director of Inu Design, and I'm also the curator for the EcoBank Design and Build exhibition taking place at the Pan-African Center on Ozumba Mbadiwe. It is my pleasure to invite you to this year's exhibition. I'm immensely glad that EcoBank is taking on this initiative to show the world how we build, how we design, and ultimately how we use spaces. This year's theme is how we build, how we live, showing the circular nature of how what we build determines how we live in those spaces, and how also the way we live should inform how we build as Nigerians, as Africans, and as humans in general. So join us from the 24th to the 28th of September 2025 to see how we build, how we live, and how lifestyle impacts design and vice versa. This year, we're putting people at the center of the conversation.
in common. We live in a home or we live in a house. That's why thinking about really what does housing mean in the context of being a Nigerian, and perhaps more importantly, what does housing mean in the context of being a Nigerian who lives in the city, a city like Lagos, Kaduna, Abuja, Ibadan, Benin City, what have you. What does it really mean? And can I have the slides, please? Yeah, thank you. So I am speaking about the concept of us rethinking urban value and in the light of adequate housing for Nigeria. And I think I can I shift this a bit so that I can see the slides? Okay. All right, so my talk is just going to cover an understanding of what do we mean when we talk about urban value. It's fine, it's okay. What do we mean when we talk about urban value? And then what does housing in Nigeria mean? We'll have a few, a brief overview of what housing in Nigeria is about, and then the interface between housing and urban, and how we're looking to urban futures, as well as looking at some of the pathways to the kinds of city that we want, and a few suggestions along the way. So, what is urban value? Urban value is the act of deeming a space as wanted or unwanted. It's an important resource for urban growth and development because the value that one gives to space is what determines whether that space is valued or not in terms of economic benefit, in terms of use, and in terms of perhaps the investments and the future of that space. And when we think about cities, when we think about people in cities, there seems to be a dividing line between the urban advantage and the urban penalty. The urban advantage tells us that the average human being who is located in the city, by virtue of being within this agglomeration of people, has better access to services, better access to infrastructure, and better access to economic opportunities. And that is very true. While we can enjoy the urban advantage as residents of urban areas, there is also the real threat or the reality of the urban penalty. And the urban penalty says that with this concentration of people in cities, there is also an unfair exposure to unhealthy physical and social environments. And the balance between the urban advantage and the urban penalty perhaps is what really determines urban value. You are blocking the... And when we look at it from a global point of view, we have the Sustainable Development Goals that many countries in the world, Nigeria inclusive, commit to. And the Sustainable Development Goals tells us that there are 17 priorities, of which housing is one. Under SDG 11, we have to make cities inclusive, safe, resilient, and sustainable. And research has shown us that SDG 11 is an entry point to SDG 11 is an entry point to practically all the SDGs. Whether it is integrated within the SDGs, it has a direct contribution to the SDGs or an indirect contribution. And what that tells us is that housing is a key component to how development can occur. Housing is intrinsic in how people can achieve their highest potential. And housing is also prioritized. The Nigerian housing policy tells us that it is a process of providing safe, comfortable, attractive, functional, affordable, and identifiable shelter in a proper setting within a neighborhood, surrounded by continuous maintenance of the built environment for the daily activities of humans, of individuals and their families within the community, while reflecting their socioeconomic, cultural aspirations and preferences. And what that tells us is that for housing to be adequate, it must reflect the person, the character or the identity of a particular community. The right to adequate housing is also something that Nigeria subscribes to, especially since it is entrenched in our constitution, and it is the right to adequate privacy, space, security, lighting, ventilation, infrastructure, and a location with regards to work and basic services at a reasonable cost. Adequate housing is the process of ensuring that every Nigerian is able to access adequate and affordable housing in order to achieve their highest potential. Hence, urban value will be enhanced with adequate housing. Now, what is the situation of housing in Nigeria? Currently, we are in an urban majority. At least 59% of our population, about close to 120 million, are living in urban areas. And there is rapid urban growth with, we have quite a number of cities, over 1,000 cities across Nigeria of at least 10,000 people, so you can imagine how dense we are. We have a rapid growth rate of about 3.8% annually, with Abuja having a growth rate of 4.6%. We also have an urban youth bulge, meaning young people are concentrated in the city. 70% of the Nigerian urban population is aged younger than 30. And in a city like Kano, about 45% of the population is younger than 15 years old. It's both an opportunity and a threat. Where are they going to, how are we going to house them? An unfortunate reality is also that our cities, there's a concentration of poverty in our cities with about 133 million Nigerians experiencing multi-dimensional poverty. 75% of those who live in cities live in slum-like conditions, having limited access to basic services, with about 45% of those in Lagos, having that kind of experience. And what that tells us is that housing is problematic, right? And if we say that urban value is enhanced by housing, then how we live to a large extent determines the quality of our urban space and perhaps the value of our urban space, and to a large extent the opportunities for the urban areas to catalyze into urban growth, economic development, and urban development. And when we place cities like Abuja and Lagos within the conglomerate of other cities, we see we're doing quite poorly on a quality of life indicators, where places like African cities like Cape Town, are doing much better. Cairo, Dar es Salaam, Nairobi are doing perhaps much better when we look at city livability versus urban density. The Nigerian housing challenge, if we're looking at it through factors with which we analyze how a sector is doing, availability, affordability, accessibility, quality, and contextualized needs, we can see that we have a big problem. There are about 28 million, we need about 28 million housing units. And even though the statistics tell us that we need 500 new units, 500,000 new units required daily, annually, about 70,000 units are being produced annually. And this is, because of a number of factors I will get to in time. Less than 10% of those who aspire to home ownership get there. And across our population, rural and urban, only about 25% own their homes, even though the quality may be suspect. Unfortunate statistics is that there has been over 200% increase in rental prices over the last 5 years. We'll come to that in a minute, and the average renter spends over 50% of his income, on housing. What it essentially means is that those of us that are working are primarily working to pay rent, to have a place to sleep at night. And it is both an opportunity and a threat. Well, we'll come back to that. Opportunities within the informal, within the mortgage market do not capture the needs and aspirations or the working conditions of those in the formal economy. And like I said earlier, even though 25% home ownership rate, data tells us that over 70% of the quality of those housing is substandard. We also have, a paucity of basic services in many of our cities, and most of the new built housing, the new housing that is entering into the housing stock, cater for higher middle income and high income earners. According to the CBN, in Nigeria, access to affordable housing has largely remained an unfulfilled dream to the vast majority, especially for the middle and lower classes of the society. And so there is an opportunity. My thinking is that when you recognize that you have a problem and you know what the problem is, then you can focus on finding a solution. And I think an opportunity like this Design and Build Expo allows us to have that conversation of thinking about what are the solutions to getting affordable housing for those who need it most. Yeah, so when you put housing and the urban together, we have an opportunity. We've recognized that there's an opportunity in the urban space, and housing is, can trigger an enhancement of urban value. Now, in thinking about development, one of the main issues we have is something that is called conflicting rationalities of development. Vanessa Watson in 1997 talked about it, about the disjuncture between how political leaders think about the city and how everyday people think about the city. And what we see is a tension between the government's will to govern and improve the urban space and the everyday people's need to survive in the city. And those tensions, when it comes to housing, fall within the tension between housing as an economic good versus housing as a social good. So we find this tilting thing between the cities for profit versus cities for people. And a lot of our leaders are thinking about the future of Nigerian cities, which is a good thing. But their thinking is somewhat problematic because they anchor a lot of their thinking on the urban advantage, whereby the urban advantage looks at the opportunities the city can bring, whereas we are neglecting to think about, yes, cities provide an advantage, but there is a very real experience that everyday urban people are facing. And so in thinking about the future of Nigerian cities, we have to find a balance. How do we propel this preferred future? How do we balance it with 75 people living in slum-like conditions or in substandard housing? How do we find a way? And so a lot of the plans, you know, are really big plans. We want to build 5 million new houses. We want, you know, our cities to look like the Dubais of this world, the Singapores of this world, New York City and things like that. It's important that our cities are smart cities, they're world-class cities. And so it's a nice feeling, but, you know, is it really what we need? And so we find that this futures thinking is, you know, it kind of moves us a bit from the reality of the cities that we should be in. And there's a lot of money, there's a lot of support, government support, there's a lot of investment behind the idea of smart cities, because smart cities are meant to be the opportunity to leapfrog us into the 21st century. And what's happening is that we see a lot of these designs, Paradise by the Lagoon and things like that, inviting us to this utopian living. You know, I think one step on our way to heaven where the streets are paved with gold. So in Nigeria, you know, it's really beautiful when we look at the brochures and, you know, what people think about the possibilities in the Nigerian urban. And it's a good thing, right? But what we see is that the plans oftentimes are driven by people with money, investors, right? Which is also a good thing because money follows ideas. And so what it tells us is that there is no limits to the kinds of ideas we have and the possibilities in Nigerian cities. It's not moving. But for somebody who lives in a community like Iwaya, close to the University of Lagos, who has worked 40 years in the civil service, retired as a matron in the General Hospital, looking at these brochures, she tells us the city is beautiful, the plan is beautiful, the city is good, but who are they for? Where are normal people going to sleep tonight? And that's a question that I put to you in thinking about the future of our cities and the possibilities in the Nigerian urban space. Where are normal people going to sleep? Now, another way, you know, when we look to these broad, you know, expansive visions of urban development, that is one threat. There's also another threat that is eating at us the way termites eat wood, and that is this disruptive innovation of short-let housing. And I remember yesterday somebody saying here that we're thinking about housing for Nigeria. We're looking at the 1% and 49%. How are they going to get housing? Because there is no market for the lowest 49% of the population. And then the person went ahead and said, oh, we've shifted our model and we are focusing on short-let. And the question the gentleman asked yesterday was, why is housing so expensive? And the reason housing is so expensive is because we have shifted away from providing housing, rental housing in this case, for everyday residents of the city, to providing housing for visitors to the city. And so there is a reduction in the availability of housing for long-term residents of the city, which results in an increase in the price of rental, which also drives new housing experience towards short-let. A lot of the investors that are coming in now to provide housing in places like Parkview, in places like Magodo, are focused on building housing that is, good for short-lets. And it also strains local infrastructure. It doesn't tell us whether a house is a residential property or whether a house is a commercial property. How then can we tax the house for something as simple as waste management? And then for those who have invested in the business of hotels, which is a proper commercial venture, how do we marry that threat? How do we marry the experience economy with, the commercial ventures? And this thing is largely unregulated. And so it comes with its own challenges. Challenges around urban management, challenges around security, challenges around what happens in a space that you cannot hold somebody responsible because the person only has a lease for 2 nights and off he goes. So the Airbnb issue or the short-let issue is not a Nigerian problem alone. In a city like Amsterdam that is trying to regulate it, someone, Cito Veracruz, said, at first I thought it was a great idea, but I now realize there are side effects that we didn't foresee. And Airbnb can be a threat for cities. In Lagos, I checked on this morning, looking at a house in Lagos. And first of all, it said you save 20% on a long-term stay. And a long-term stay is 28 days or more. And it came up with over 1,000 rooms in Lagos alone available for short-term letting. What that tells us is there are 1,000 less rental housing available for people to rent in the city. And with charges $25, $15, $19, how many of you know you are paying in dollars in Nigeria, the money is being repatriated outside the country, and there's this gap between how you get money into the economy. And so if urban value in the Nigerian housing sector is underpinned by smartness, whether it's the smart city or whether it's the tech-enabled rental, are we prepared for the consequences, whether it's top or bottom? And what are some of these consequences? Demolitions. Evictions. And dead spaces. And if we were to remind ourselves, all these places that were demolished, they used to be homes. They used to be people's dreams. They used to be people's assets. So are we increasing the housing stock or are we reducing it? And then you need to be able to afford 8.5 million naira to be able to get a 3-bedroom apartment in the suburbs of Abuja or in central Lagos. Not many people earn 7.5 million naira annually. Not many households earn. And when you think back that a preponderant percentage of our population is young, aged below 30, just starting their lives, how are they going to be able to afford this? It put things in proper perspective. So there are ways to adequate housing, and really that is what we should be thinking about. Everyday Nigerians are doing housing, right? In spite of some of the challenges that I've mentioned. On the average, people, do incremental housing. You save some money, you buy land. You do your contributory pension, you do your foundation. Then you have to send your child to school, and then you hold on for 2 years, and then you do another job, your cooperative loan, and you're able to do the house to lintel level, like that. over a space of 10 years, you eventually have a house that belongs to you. And you move from being a tenant to Baba landlord. And if you are lucky, before you are retired, you are able to get a flat or two so that when you retire, your rent from that apartment is able to keep you until you go to meet your maker. And so that's a model most of us are familiar with. And then you have cooperative societies, cooperative loan. You are able to get funding for low income, for low interest in order to speed up your construction, especially when your landlord tells you to bring 7.5 million naira, and you look at it as 7.5 million naira. I don't have that, but 5 million naira, I don't need to do a ceiling, I'll just roof. And after a while, you know, we'll be able to move in and fix the house as we are moving on. And then if you live in a community, particularly on the outskirts of Lagos, chances are the light pole, the road, and all of that came to be because you have to join the CDA and you have to contribute for it. And what that says is that we're living together, we're able to mobilize community efforts. And then there's a lot of user transformations, building the house, adjusting it to serve the purpose that is required per time. And that's what everyday Nigerians are doing. Essentially coming together, mobilizing efforts, mobilizing funds through a series of ways in order to achieve their housing aspirations. There are over 50 million Nigerian households that are represented in about 300,000 registered cooperatives across the country. And these registered cooperatives, many of them are not housing cooperatives, but they are very important to supporting Nigerians achieve their housing desires, whether it's by cooperative society loans to pay their rent, or cooperative society loans to buy land, or cooperative society loans to build. And from a study, we're able to see that over 78% got loans for construction, got loan to buy, or got land from the cooperative. I think that's an opportunity. We are people who believe in the collective, who are, you know, whose individual strength oftentimes is insufficient to do the things we really aspire to do as it relates to housing. And so when we are thinking about the future of Nigerian cities and the value that we should place on making these cities places where we can live, places where the quality of life is enhanced, places that we can call adequate with regards to housing, there's a need for us to think beyond what is obvious or what is glaring, and to start to understand that urban value is kind of, the balance tilts when we emphasize the things that do not uphold us or that are not reflective of the identity that we have. And a singular identity that we have as Nigerians is this idea of cooperation. And so, in thinking about the urban futures, in thinking about adequate housing, it's important for us to shelve thinking about, you know, these gated communities, smart cities, and all of that, to start looking at the obvious opportunities in how Nigerians are living their lives and finding a way perhaps to scale up or to provide more support for sustainability in that space. Elon Bassett tells us that there's a new narrative that is required for African cities that is not romantic, but realistic. And that is where we want to go. What we want is a balance between cities for people and cities for profit. And that is intrinsic in recognizing that urban value should implement a shift from looking at the future of cities, from demolishing to build new aspirational, to thinking about how can we improve what is there now? How can we revitalize those areas? How can we, do something, use what we have to start to build and to push us in the direction of the future that we want? And I think urban regeneration rather than urban transformation is the way to go. Urban regeneration says, let us improve where we are now in a way that benefits us now and benefits us and our children in the future. But it comes with a caveat. There's the importance to look at it from an empirical perspective to be sure that what we're doing is backed by data, and to be sure that it is based on local priorities, that the solutions that we are providing are solutions that address the problems that we are facing now, and that those solutions are also solutions that we can build upon, scale up, and maintain. And the first is rethinking the ideological underpinnings of urban development and moving from thinking about housing as an economic good to realizing that housing is both an economic and a social good. Housing has an opportunity. There's something in housing, there's something in where you live that determines perhaps how far you go in life. And so prioritizing adequate housing, prioritizing understanding how we can improve the location of where our people live and where our young people particularly are being built, it's important. And then urbanization is an opportunity, but it must be done right. There's also need for us to look at the solutions and ensure that the solutions address the problems that people face, and that investments in research and development are focused on, to a large extent, bringing down the cost of construction, bringing down the cost of housing. Yesterday, it was said time and time again that housing is expensive, and it is a problem. And it's a problem that must be addressed if we're going to move forward. And that smart cities, the smart city thinking is not bad in and of itself, but it's important that the smart solutions must have co-benefits. We need new cities, but we need new cities for those who are currently homeless or suffering from housing poverty. And so our smart cities must be people smart and must respond to cycle of life. When you just leave university, there's a type of housing you need. When you get married and you have a family, there's a type of housing you need. When you retire, there's a type of housing you need. Somebody who built an 8-bedroom mansion in his heydays, most likely when he retires will be using, the downstairs guest room until it's time to go. So we have to also think about cycle of life when thinking about housing. And then there's also a need for us to think about, yes, new build is good, new build is necessary, but how do we improve housing that is on ground? The data tells us that a lot of the housing that is currently on ground is substandard. How do we improve that? A lot of the data tells us that 75% of us are living in slum-like environments. How do we improve that? How do we ensure that we're bringing good drainage? Lagos was grounded to a halt 2 or 3 days ago because of the rain. How do we open up the drains, ensure that water is able to pass so that it doesn't destroy our assets? And then there's a catalytic role of urban governance. If you get governance right, most likely things will run faster. And that's why urban planning and urban management must be taken seriously if we're going to get cities right. And so I will stop here. And one of the things I want to say is that when we're thinking about the future of cities, we have the opportunity to do it right, whether at the scale of the neighborhood or whether at the scale of the city. We see that in Nigeria, there are cities of 10,000, people, and there are cities of over 10 million people. But the idea is the same. In looking to the future, what is it about the present that we can do right? In thinking about how our cities are going to work, how our cities, well, the future cities will definitely work because we've been looking at this utopia. But before we get to those, to that future, how do we ensure that we survive today and survive in a way that enhances our well-being? Thank you.
Thank you, Professor. Thank you. Can we give her another round of applause, please? Thank you for that detailed and engaging address. Do we have any questions, please? Oh, yeah, I have questions, but then I'm allowing everybody else to go first. I have a habit of picking people out if they, don't volunteer. So, any questions from the floor? Question in front, please.
Well, thank you so much for that very beautiful presentation. Okay, so taking us to countries, developed countries, like Canada, for instance, when they are setting up a new neighborhood, so they usually have, in the same neighborhood, they have a place earmarked for the top echelon of the society, and at the same time, for, let me use the word, the masses. So they are not far away from each other, and you can only distinguish between those two looking at the structures, okay? But they are within the same neighborhood, they tend to go to the same school and all that. So in your own view, how do you think we can get this, incorporated into our society in a way and manner that the low class or medium class people can one way or the other find themselves within Eco-Atlantic? So I'm just wondering, is this possible? Is this something that is doable in a country like ours, or is just an idea that we shouldn't just even think about? Thank you.
Thank you, sir. So I've asked Professor to not answer because you kind of started my question. So I'm going to add my question to yours and then give an opportunity to answer. So my question was, in countries like the UK, there are policies that the government has where you have to, even developers, when they're building, you have to allocate certain to what they call key workers. So nurses, teachers, care workers, people that could otherwise not afford those spaces, but they need those workers to be comfortable so that they can provide the key services that they provide. So like what you're saying, having some teachers, have the developers in Eco-Atlantic have to allocate space to a certain number of teachers. It's percentages. So I'm tagging my question onto his. What do you think the solution is for a city like Lagos, for example? Is there space for government policy? Because part of our discussion this week is how do we put people at the center of the conversation? Which people do we look at to do that?
All right, thank you for the questions. The examples you used are of cities or countries where housing is seen as a tool for ensuring equity. And so there has to be deliberate action to ensure that there's equity. And the primary purpose of government, for example, is to see to the well-being of people and to ensure that everybody has an opportunity to achieve their highest potential. And that cuts across wherever there is a government. And so deliberate action is required on the part of government. And that is why I talked about a shift in ideology and the underpinnings of what we define as development, of what we define as, an ideal society. Unfortunately, because of some gaps that have been in our past, our cities are built as cities of walls and gates. We have a manifestation of the architecture of fear, and that's why everywhere is a gated community. In the UK, in Canada, it is very rare to find, estates, places where thousands of people live behind a gate. And so one of the first things we need to do is to start to find a way to re-engineer the kind of fragmentation, socioeconomic fragmentation and segregation that we've experienced in most of our cities. And this starts from, ensuring that the kinds of housing solutions that are being provided by government speak to these issues. Eko Atlantic City may not be an ideal example because it is a private city. It is a city that is being promoted by the private sector. But at least for government public housing, there must be a deliberate effort. There must be intentionality about breaking down those barriers that separate residents, that separates people for which they have a mandate to see to their well-being.
Thank you. So in effect, from what I'm hearing, it's also what we're seeing in terms of urban, I guess, shall I say, segregation? It's a strong term, but I don't know which other one to use. It's probably a reflection of what is happening in the larger society as well. So it's almost like the inequality or lack of equity in certain areas is bleeding into how we approach space.
Yes, and it has grown over time. The city we have today is not a city that started yesterday. It's a city that has been fragmented, even from colonial times. From the colonial times, we have the average Nigerian city runs a dual city. The government reserved areas, which is terminology from the colonizers, that tells us that some people need to be in a separate space and be taken care of, and then the rest kind of have to take care of themselves. And so, unfortunately, our planning, the thinking of planning and the way planning is operationalized hasn't changed much from that model. And that's why we will have a GRA in the 21st century, government having a GRA, a government reserve area, in the 21st century. It shouldn't be in our lexicon because it's something we inherited from the colonizers.
Thank you so much. I think we have I can see some hands going up. There was a gentleman on that side. I saw him. Oh, okay, you have the mic, so.
I don't know. Okay, good morning. Thank you very much, ma'am, for the presentation. My name is Ayo Gidon. I work with a company called CESO Global. We deal more with the diaspora. So there's something going on now because of the constant devaluation of the Naira. It's almost like in direct proportion to the increase in prices of properties. So you would see like an uncompleted building somewhere in Isheri North, and then you see, because I am on so many platforms, and you see a price of 120 million underneath it, an uncompleted building in Isheri North. And then you're like, seriously, So recently, someone asked me for a 2-bedroom apartment at Shongotedo. And he said his budget is 65 million and he was supposed to use the MREF initiative to fund it. So, I mean, initially I was like, it's not going to be a problem. I mean, it's 65 million for a 2-bedroom. And then we went to the market and we saw that to get a 2-bedroom apartment, even in Isheri North now, is extremely difficult. The list I saw completed was 80 million. The next to that was something close to VGC, not inside VGC, outside VGC. You understand? One of those properties, Shell Farm, 74 million. And that's just to tell you how rapidly the gap is increasing, you understand, and how rapidly the property prices are leaving us. You understand? How do you control this? Is there anything to be done to at least check it a little bit? Thank you.
Thank you. It's a huge question. So if you have the answer, I'm going to record it on my phone if you can, you know. That's my opportunity to maybe make some money.
It's a very difficult question, and you know, most of those who have homes, who are providing housing for the market, are individual private sector participants. Many of those who are in the rental market are buying houses or selling houses or renting houses as their own form of social security. And so the pricing of housing is responding to two things: the market, as well as, you know, the larger economic environment. And that's why I talked about the threat of the shortlets. In the Lekki Shongotedo axis, a lot of the housing that is available for rent or that is on the market is only available on Airbnb and things like that. And so, you know, it goes without saying that there is need for regulation of that environment. I know there was a time in Berlin, for example, there was a levy on empty housing. If a house was left uninhabited for a certain number of months, you had to pay for keeping the house off the market. There's also a paucity of data. A lot of what we're dealing with is conjecture. We don't know how many houses are on the market. We don't know how many houses are available for sale. We don't know how many houses are available for rent. Our housing deficit is also based on conjecture, based on the number of housing that we think is available and the number of people we think are in the country. This is how much housing we need, and so this is what the housing deficit is. So there's definitely need for data, and there's need for regulation of, you know, the entire real estate ecosystem. And it must be anchored. The regulation, the regulatory environment, the policy environment must be anchored on housing justice. And what is housing justice? Ensuring that everybody at their stage in life is able to get housing they can afford and that meets their need. And I think, you know, it's a big issue.
Yep.
It can be overwhelming, but the important thing is that it must start. We must get to a point where we, like you said, center the human in the conversation.
Thank you very much. I guess it's also finding the balance between allowing the free market, you know, demand and supply. If the demand is higher than the supply, the prices go up, but also having a certain amount of government intervention to regulate, so individuals are not able to just charge without even giving economic value for what they're charging. It's that tension between the two that's probably also at play.
Yes, and that's, you know, balancing housing as both an economic good and a social good. You know, there are so many of us, so no matter what you sell, you're likely to make a profit.
Yeah.
And if we look at it from that angle, how about we provide a service that helps people, you know, achieve their life goal while also making a profit? You don't have to buy a Lamborghini. You know, you only need to move from point A to point B. So a Toyota will move you there, right? So if we can, you know, kind of calibrate a bit by thinking about the next person, we can do good and also make a profit.
So this is now introducing fairness alongside equity as well. Thank you very much. I think the gentleman has a mic, yes.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Daniel Okosu, and I'm a rep from Yama College of Technology, from the School of Environmental and the Department of Quantity Surveying. So my parts of the, based on the topic that was shared here, a question came up to me, and I think if I need clarity on it. And the question is, how do we go on an analytical comparison for provisions of recreational facilities in modern housing developments? How do you go about it in Nigeria? Thank you.
Okay. I spoke about urban planning, right? Urban planning is a process of arranging a city or of allocating land uses in a neighborhood. And these land uses include residential, which is housing, circulatory, ensuring the roads and the drainages are put together, and services, ensuring that for a particular population, there is a primary school, or there is a secondary school, or there is a library, there's a community center. And so it's important that urban planning is the starting point of spatial development, ensuring that not for us to have optimum housing satisfaction, it is not only the shelter, right? Housing is not only the shelter, but the ancillary services that make for an enhanced quality of life. And that's where the recreation spaces coming. That's where places of worship coming. That's where the community center and all of that coming. But we live in an environment that unfortunately has grown way beyond our capacity. And so some of the recreational spaces have been converted to housing in many of the housing estates and local communities. How do we still achieve recreation in an environment that is not optimum? And that's when we start to think about the co-benefits of infrastructure. How do we ensure that the infrastructure for pedestrianization, for active travel, for example, is safe enough for people to be able to, recreate? How do we ensure that there are enough street lights and protection for the average person to run? How do we look and ensure that air quality is optimum so that when people are running, they are able to run in a safe environment and an environment that will enhance their well-being and health. And so it's the art of planning, of urban planning and urban management is so interrelated, but in the environment we live in where there are scarce resources, including scarce land resources, we must look for multifunctional spaces. That's one. And the second, we must look for solutions that have co-benefits. The city that we are in, the city that we must make or remake for ourselves, is a city where one space must have multifunctional uses. And that's where resilience comes in. That's where creativity comes in. The tools that we have been dealt with are not ideal, but we must make the best of it.
Thank you very much. So that's now addressing the issue of the composition of the actual cities. So what does equity really look like? And I guess it also ties in with the theme of the exhibition, which is how we build and how we live. So how we live also comprises of recreation. It's not just work and sleep. Thank you very much.
Professor Olawansin again for a very good lecture. In societies, different countries, people face a lot of issues, and these issues are supposed to be resolved, by the authorities. But like a management expert said, that 80% of the work will be done by 20% of the people. Those 20%, that will resolve the issue, like in this case, the urban development issue we are having in countries like Nigeria, are the professionals in that profession and the academy. the academicians who have studied this issue deeply. And I've seen it in your presentation. In fact, you have most of the solutions, or most of our, you have the solution to most of our problems. And I also see here that we have academicians. One already spoke here. So the thing is, these are the 20% who will resolve 80% of the problem we are having. And I know they're trying to do it. I know you're also trying to do that. Resolve this problem. You've given us solution to quite a number of issues now, right there. Now you are doing it, and we're having issues. You keep saying that because of the kind of people we have, how we have developed, yes, we have issues. And I believe that almost all problems have solutions. An issue we have here is that what the 20% have been doing, the academicians, the professors, the experts in that profession, we are not actually seeing the results. You know, what are the strategies you are using? What are the challenges you are facing? And if you have a personal advice, how the 20% can go about finding these solutions to our problem, especially relating to this. If you have, advice, new strategy that they can take, from your own personal experience. That's my question, Professor.
All right, thank you very much. And have a responsibility to the environment and to see, to the environment and to see, to the reworking of space for sustainability. And I think, speaking as an urban planner here, one of the challenges we have is also the tensions across the estate valuers and all of that. So we are all, it's like an elephant, all right, and each person is, whereas we all need to get the elephant to move. And so collaboration is key. We need to be speaking with each other rather than to each other. That's one. And then we also have to have a united front. And then, yes, the built environment professionals have a mandate to see to the working of so that our own personal environment works. And what does it, what do I mean? Something as, burning your refuse. And what does it, what do I mean? Something as, burning your refuse. Basic things like that. If you take personal responsibility and have a responsibility to take care of our environment, we are custodians of the environment. Because at the end of the day, there's one sky, right? And if I'm doing my part and you're not doing your part, then if the sky falls, it's going to fall on all of us. So we need to take personal responsibility and we need to protect the environment. And I think the other thing is that we should not wait for the professionals. We need to wait for the professionals. Sometimes maybe it's even important for us to start so that the professionals can be shamed into doing the right thing. The other thing I will talk about, I think some of it was talked about yesterday, is the training, right? What kind of curriculum are we using to train the architects and planners that are coming on board? How many of them are aware, are able, have the tools to deal with the urban realities that we find ourselves in today? How many of them are equipped with the technical and social skills to deal with, the city of today?
To get funding for housing, first of all, you acquire the land, it's expensive. Cost of construction is crazy. The banks are not going to give you loans unless their interest is about 35–40%. You have private investors that obviously are not concerned about the people, they are concerned about their money, and you have to account to them. In Ibadan, for example, we have new GRAs, as you spoke about, evolving. We have a park, Agodi Gardens. Nice park. I grew up there as a child. I'd go there. It was free. Then we started to pay some fines. And now the state government has reclaimed the land, sold it to private developers, and now it's selling at about 250 million per plot. in Ibadan. So the government is doing that. So as a developer, I get funding. I acquire 2 plots, 500 million. I get funding to build, and then I'm paying interest on that, remitting capital to my investors with their interest. I also have to make profit, and this is the reality of the real estate sector. So besides government intervention and hopefully some way magically appealing to, everyone's sense of human decency, which is not a guiding factor in business, if we're being honest, because they need their money back, and it's pretty much a private sector at this moment. How else can we play a role, or what other things can realistically be done to help fill this gap? Thank you.
Okay. So I give you an example of a model that I'm aware of in Lagos. There is a developer who goes into local communities and gets landlords of housing that is subpar. He could speak to 4 landlords in a row and tell them, hey, your house is not good enough because these are the issues. How about we go into a 20-year arrangement, improve this housing, provide the toilets, provide the bathrooms, rework them, the rooms and all of that, put in additional rooms, and impose a model of rental as a model of monthly rental as against the annual rental. And he works the numbers, puts in the facilities, puts in the additional rooms, and then provides rental to people in the community at a bit higher than what is going on per room. Because there are facilities, because it's a much improved housing, he has been able to convert, to use that model to build a lot of new housing. And that street in Ajegunle is going through its own organic regeneration through that kind of creative idea. Businesses want to make profit, but there is also something called ethical business. And that's why we have things like social entrepreneurship. Unfortunately, the model is not strong enough to be scaled up rapidly. And so perhaps the challenge is, where do we find patient capital for housing? And that is, a real challenge in the context of Nigeria. You can't build a house that is sustainable, that people can afford, using the kind of interest rates that we currently have. And so in thinking about it, we need to start looking for investors that are willing to drop patient capital. And I think among the developers, that's a conversation that needs to be had. If there are enough developers who are committed to these ethical practices and using housing as a social and economic good, then we can start to map ways that kind of funding will come. Because people will pay, they will pay a bit above premium if it's within the affordability, context. People will pay because we want an improved service. But it shouldn't be, we don't need luxury. We need adequate. And I think, how do we unlock the funding that can provide adequate housing in a way that everybody wins?
So, I think, again, it goes back to what you were saying earlier about where some people see a problem. There are people that will see opportunities in that. The example of the landlord you gave, a lot of other people would have just seen that as a problem and moved on to build luxury. But he saw it as an opportunity. And sometimes it's a numbers game as well for the business people. If you can get more units with better facilities where people will pay a bit more, and you multiply that as opposed to always wanting to make the profit from 2 luxury apartments, whereas you can build maybe 20 affordable ones, but the uptake is quicker. Then maybe people start looking, the actual business people also start looking at that, working within the restrictions that we have within the economics of Nigeria. We all know what that is, but seeing opportunities where people see problems is also key. So on that note, I'd like to say thank you very much. Can we give Dr. Lawinson a round of applause? Thank you for bringing such wealth of knowledge and for taking your time to address all of our questions so well and in such detail. Thank you very much. Can we give another round of applause, please? Thank you. Thank you all for staying for the master class. We have the immersive kitchen starting soon next door for as many people as want to stay. And we also have another panel discussion this afternoon at 2 o'clock right here. And in the meantime, you can look around the exhibition and see what some of our practitioners are doing right now as we regenerate on our journey to transformation. So thank you very much. See you later.